Ezra stood on the creaking porch of his father's Savannah mansion, the weight of 30 years of memories pressing against his chest. The for sale sign stabbed into the lawn felt like a betrayal, each letter a confession of his failure. How do you sell the only home you've ever known? And what happens when the buyer wants more than just the deed? The house, a sprawling Greek revival relic, had been his father's pride, a monument to a life Ezra could never quite live up to. At 28, he was a bankrupt architect, his dreams of designing bold, sustainable structures buried under a mountain of debt. The bank's foreclosure notice had arrived like a guillotine, and now, with his father gone, Ezra had no choice but to let go of the last piece of his legacy. He wiped sweat from his brow, the Georgia heat clinging to his skin as he surveyed the overgrown garden. The oak trees, draped in Spanish moss, whispered secrets of better days. Ezra's hazel eyes caught the glint of a car pulling into the driveway, a sleek black SUV, out of place against the peeling paint and cracked columns. Who could afford this place in today's market? And why did Ezra feel like his life was about to change? The driver's door opened, and out stepped Julian Carter, a name Ezra had only heard through the real estate agent's emails. Julian, 30, was all confidence. Tall, with warm brown skin and short curls framing a face that could sell anything. His tailored blazer and easy smile screamed success, but his eyes held a depth that made Ezra pause. "You must be Ezra," Julian said, extending a hand. "This place is something else." Ezra shook his hand, feeling the warmth of Julian's grip linger. "It's a mess," he admitted, gesturing to the sagging porch. "But it's home." Why did saying that hurt so much? And why did Julian's gaze feel like it saw straight through him? Julian wandered the property, his questions sharp but kind, about the house's history, its quirks, the way the light hit the stained glass windows at dusk. Ezra found himself talking more than he intended, sharing stories of his father's late-night sketches, the way they dreamed of restoring the mansion together. Julian listened, really listened, and Ezra felt a spark he hadn't in years. Was it possible to feel this connected to a stranger? As they stood under the massive oak in the backyard, Julian turned to him, his voice low. "This house has soul, Ezra. It's not just a sale for me. I see potential for the house and maybe for us." Ezra's heart skipped. What did he mean by us? And why did the idea both thrill and terrify him? Over the next week, Julian visited daily, each tour blurring the line between business and something deeper. Ezra showed him hidden nooks, the attic where he'd sketched his first designs, the library where his father read him poetry. Julian shared his own story. A foster kid turned real estate mogul, driven by a hunger to build something lasting. Their conversations flowed effortlessly, charged with an unspoken tension. Ezra caught himself staring at Julian's hands, imagining them tracing more than just blueprints. One evening, as they sat on the porch steps, Julian's knee brushed Ezra's. "I'm not just buying this house," Julian said, his voice steady but vulnerable. "I want to know the man who loves it. I want to know you." Ezra froze. He'd spent years hiding his attraction to men, burying it under his father's expectations and his own failures. Could he risk opening his heart when he was already losing everything? The question hung in the air as fireflies began to dance in the yard. Ezra's mind raced. What does it mean to let someone in when you're about to lose your foundation? And how do you trust a man who holds the keys to your past, and maybe your future? Ezra couldn't sleep that night, Julian's words echoing in his head. He wandered the mansion's halls, tracing the worn banister, each creak a reminder of his father's absence. Growing up, Ezra had idolized his dad, a gruff but brilliant architect who'd poured his soul into this house. But he'd never accepted Ezra's queerness, dismissing it as a phase. Now, with the house slipping away, Ezra felt like he was losing his father all over again. Could he honor his past while reaching for something new? Julian's visits became the highlight of Ezra's days. They'd explore the property, debating renovations, Ezra's sustainable designs clashing with Julian's modern vision. Yet their differences felt like a dance, each argument pulling them closer. One afternoon, in the dusty attic, Julian found Ezra's old sketchbook, filled with dreamlike buildings that blended nature and structure. "These are incredible," Julian said, his fingers brushing Ezra's as he handed it back. "Why'd you stop?" Ezra hesitated, the weight of his bankruptcy pressing down. "Life got in the way," he muttered. But Julian's gaze didn't waver, and for the first time, Ezra felt seen. Not as a failure, but as someone with something to offer. Was this what it felt like to be wanted? Their connection deepened, but so did Ezra's doubts. Julian was a developer used to flipping properties for profit. What if this, whatever this was just a game to him? The mansion was appraised at $1.2 million, a fortune Ezra could never match. If Julian bought it, he'd own Ezra's past. Could Ezra trust him with his heart? One rainy afternoon, they took shelter in the greenhouse, its glass panes fogged with mist. Julian's hand grazed Ezra's arm, and the air crackled. "I've never met anyone like you," Julian whispered. "This house, this moment, it's all tied to you." Ezra's breath caught. He wanted to lean in, to close the distance, but fear held him back. What happens when you fall for someone who's buying your world out from under you? By the end of the week, Julian made an offer, $1.3 million, above asking. Ezra's relief was overshadowed by dread. The sale would clear his debts, but it meant losing the house and maybe Julian, too. As they stood in the backyard, the oak tree looming above, Julian turned to him. "I don't want to just buy this place," he said. "I want you to stay. Help me restore it. Build something with me." Ezra's heart pounded. Was this a business proposal or something more? The question lingered as Ezra stared at the house, its silhouette stark against the twilight. Could he rebuild his life with Julian, or would letting go of the house mean letting go of himself? Ezra's hands trembled as he held the offer letter, the numbers blurring through unshed tears. Julian's proposal, $1.3 million and a chance to stay, felt like a lifeline but also a trap. How do you build a future with someone when you're still haunted by your past? The next morning, Savannah's humidity clung to Ezra like a second skin as he met Julian at a downtown cafe. The place buzzed with locals, but Julian's presence made the world narrow to just the two of them. Over coffee, Julian outlined his vision. Restore the mansion, preserve its history, and turn it into a community arts center. "Your designs," he said, pointing to Ezra's sketchbook. "They could make this place live again." Ezra's chest tightened. Why did Julian's belief in him feel so dangerous? They spent days planning, sketching under the oak tree, their shoulders brushing as they argued over beams and budgets. Ezra's passion reignited, his ideas flowing: solar panels, reclaimed wood, a rooftop garden. Julian matched him, his pragmatism grounding Ezra's dreams. But every shared laugh, every lingering glance, deepened Ezra's fear. He'd never been open about his sexuality. Not in this conservative city, not with his father's shadow looming. What if Julian's interest was just pity for a broken man? One night, they worked late in the mansion's library, surrounded by dusty books and flickering candlelight. Julian's hand rested on Ezra's, and the air stilled. "Why do you keep pulling back?" Julian asked, his voice soft but piercing. Ezra's throat tightened. He wanted to confess. His shame, his longing, his fear of losing everything. But the words wouldn't come. Instead, he stood, muttering about needing air, and fled to the porch. Outside, the night was alive with crickets. Julian followed, his steps quiet but firm. "Ezra, talk to me," he said. "I'm not here to take anything from you." Ezra's eyes stung. "This house is all I have left of him," he whispered. "If I let you in, I'm letting him go." Julian stepped closer, his warmth a contrast to the cool night. You're not losing him. You're building something new. Could Ezra believe that? Could he let himself want this? The next day, a complication arose. The bank flagged the sale, citing a lien from Ezra's failed firm. A $50,000 debt he thought was settled. Panic clawed at him. If the sale fell through, he'd lose the house to foreclosure. Julian, unfazed, offered to cover the lien. "Consider it an investment," he said with a grin. But Ezra bristled. Was he just a charity case to Julian? Or was this love masquerading as a business deal? They argued in the mansion's kitchen, voices echoing off cracked tiles. "I don't need your pity," Ezra snapped. Julian's eyes flashed. "This isn't pity. I see you, Ezra, your talent, your heart. I'm not walking away." The words hit like a tidal wave, and Ezra's defenses cracked. He stepped forward, closing the gap, and kissed Julian. A desperate, electric collision of fear and desire. Julian kissed him back, hands steady on Ezra's face, grounding him in a way he hadn't felt in years. But the moment shattered when Ezra's phone buzzed. His ex-partner from the firm, Claire, had heard about the sale and demanded a cut, claiming Ezra owed her for their failed venture. Her threat to sue could derail everything. Ezra's stomach churned. How do you fight for a future when your past keeps pulling you back? Julian stayed by his side, strategizing ways to counter Claire's claim. They met with a lawyer, a sharp woman named Lena, who warned that Claire's case was shaky but could delay the sale for months. Ezra felt trapped, the mansion slipping further away. Yet Julian's presence, his hand squeezing Ezra's under the table, kept him tethered. "We'll figure this out," Julian said. "Together." But could Ezra trust together when he'd always faced the world alone? As they left the lawyer's office, rain poured down, soaking them. Under a streetlight, Julian pulled Ezra close, their foreheads touching. "I'm not giving up on this," Julian said, voice fierce. "Not the house, not you." Ezra's heart raced. Was this what it felt like to be chosen? And could he choose Julian back, even with everything at stake? The rain didn't stop, and neither did Ezra's doubts. Claire's lawsuit loomed like a storm cloud, threatening to wash away the fragile hope he'd built with Julian. How do you hold on to love when your past is a creditor demanding payment? Ezra and Julian threw themselves into saving the sale. They spent days in the mansion, poring over legal documents and Ezra's old firm records. The library became their war room, littered with coffee cups and crumpled notes. Julian's optimism was relentless, but Ezra felt the weight of every mistake he'd made, every loan he'd taken, every project that had collapsed. "You don't have to fix this alone," Julian said one night, his hand on Ezra's shoulder. But why did Ezra feel like he was dragging Julian down with him? Claire's claim hinged on a contract Ezra barely remembered signing, a vague promise of shared profits from their failed firm. Lena, their lawyer, dug into the details, uncovering emails that suggested Claire had mismanaged funds herself. "This could work in our favor," Lena said, but Ezra's stomach twisted. Confronting Claire meant confronting his own failures, his naivety, his trust in someone who'd left him to drown. Could he face her without losing himself? Julian suggested a meeting with Claire to negotiate. Ezra dreaded it, but Julian's steady presence gave him courage. They met at a neutral spot, a quiet park on the outskirts of Savannah. Claire, 32, was all sharp edges, her blonde hair pulled tight, her eyes cold. "You owe me, Ezra," she said, voice cutting. "That house is my payout." Ezra's fists clenched. How could she claim his father's legacy when she'd abandoned him at his lowest? Julian stepped in, calm but firm. "The house isn't yours, Claire, and Ezra's not your scapegoat." His defense stirred something in Ezra, pride, gratitude, and a flicker of love he couldn't ignore. The negotiation stalled, but Julian's hand on Ezra's back kept him grounded. As they left, Ezra realized he wasn't just fighting for the house anymore. He was fighting for a future with Julian. But was that future even possible? Back at the mansion, they found refuge in the greenhouse, its glass walls shielding them from the world. Julian pulled Ezra close, their breaths mingling. "You're stronger than you think," Julian whispered. Ezra wanted to believe him, but fear gnawed at him. What if Claire won? What if he lost everything again? The next blow came swiftly. The bank, impatient with the legal delays, threatened to auction the house if the lien wasn't resolved in 2 weeks. Ezra's panic surged, but Julian refused to let him spiral. "We'll fight this," he said, pulling out his laptop to research precedents. His determination was a lifeline, but Ezra couldn't shake the feeling that he was a burden. Why would someone like Julian's successful whole choose him? One evening, as they worked late, Julian shared more of his past. He'd grown up in foster care, bounced between homes, never belonging. "This house, this project, it's my chance to build something permanent," he said. "And I want you in it." Ezra's heart ached. Julian's vulnerability mirrored his own, and for the first time he saw their connection as a strength, not a risk. Could he let himself love without fear? They kissed again, slower this time, under the oak tree's shadow. The world felt quieter, the weight of the lawsuit momentarily forgotten. But the next morning, Claire escalated her claim, filing a motion that could force an auction. Ezra's hope faltered. How do you keep fighting when the odds are stacked against you? Julian, undeterred, rallied their allies, local preservationists, Ezra's old architecture professors, even the cafe owner who'd overheard their story. They launched a campaign to save the mansion, framing it as a community treasure. Ezra was stunned by the support, but guilt lingered. Was he worth all this effort? And could he trust Julian's heart when his own was so scarred? As the auction deadline loomed, Ezra stood on the porch, staring at the for sale sign. Julian joined him, their shoulders touching. "We're not done yet," Julian said. "Not with the house, not with us." Ezra wanted to believe him, but the clock was ticking. Could they save the mansion and each other before time ran out? The auction was 10 days away, and Ezra felt like he was drowning in quicksand. Every step forward, every legal win, every community rally, seemed to pull him deeper into doubt. How do you trust a future when the past keeps clawing you back? Julian's campaign gained traction. Savannah's preservationists flooded the bank with letters, arguing the mansion's historic value. Local artists offered to host fundraisers, their enthusiasm humbling Ezra. But Claire's lawsuit hung over them, her lawyer digging for any leverage to stall the sale. Ezra spent sleepless nights in the mansion's attic, surrounded by his father's old blueprints, searching for a way to fight back. Why did every solution feel like a betrayal of his dad's memory? Julian, relentless, proposed a bold move: buy out Claire's claim. He'd liquidate part of his portfolio to cover the $50,000 lien, ensuring the sale could proceed. Ezra balked. "I can't let you do that," he said, voice raw. "This is my mess." Julian's eyes softened. "It's our mess now," he replied, and Ezra's heart cracked open. Could he accept help without losing himself? They met Claire again, this time at Lena's office. The air was thick with tension as Julian laid out the offer. $50,000 to drop the suit. Claire's smirk faltered, but she countered, demanding $100,000. Ezra's stomach dropped. She was gambling with his life and she knew it. Julian didn't flinch. 50 or we go to court and you get nothing, he said. Claire's silence was deafening, but she agreed to consider it. As they left, Ezra grabbed Julian's hand, gratitude and fear warring inside him. Was this partnership real, or was he just a project to Julian? The community rally was a turning point. Hundreds gathered in the mansion's garden, string lights twinkling as artists performed and locals shared stories of the house's history. Ezra spoke, his voice shaking as he described his father's love for the place. Julian stood beside him, a quiet pillar of strength. For the first time, Ezra felt like he belonged, not just to the house but to something bigger. Could this be the home he'd been searching for? Claire's response came the next day. She'd accept the $50,000, but only if Ezra publicly admitted fault for their firm's failure. The demand hit like a punch. Admitting that would tarnish his reputation, his father's legacy, and any hope of restarting his career. Julian urged him to fight, but Ezra hesitated. "Maybe she's right," he whispered. "Maybe I am the failure." Julian's face hardened. "You're not a failure. You're the man I'm falling for." The words hung between them, raw and undeniable. Ezra's breath caught. Was love enough to rewrite his story? They spent the night in the mansion's library, wrapped in blankets, talking until dawn. Julian shared his fears of never being enough, of losing Ezra to doubt. Ezra confessed his own, of loving too deeply, of failing again. Their vulnerability felt like a bridge, connecting their broken pieces. But the auction loomed, and Claire's deadline was tomorrow. Could they outmaneuver her in time? Lena found a loophole. Claire's contract was unenforceable due to her own financial misconduct. Armed with this, they confronted her one last time. In a tense meeting, Lena presented the evidence, and Claire's bravado crumbled. She dropped the suit, but not without a final jab. "You'll always be a nobody, Ezra." The words stung, but Julian's hand in his dulled the pain. As they walked away, Ezra felt lighter. Was this what freedom felt like? The bank approved the sale, and Julian's offer was finalized. But Ezra's relief was bittersweet. The house would be saved, but what about them? Julian pulled him into the greenhouse, their sanctuary, and kissed him fiercely. "This isn't the end," he said. "It's the start." Ezra wanted to believe him, but a question lingered. Could he build a life with Julian without losing himself? The sale closed on a crisp Savannah morning, the mansion officially Julian's. Ezra stood on the porch, the for sale sign gone, replaced by a hollow ache. How do you move forward when your past is no longer yours, but your heart is finally free? Julian wasted no time. He hired Ezra as lead architect for the restoration, insisting his designs shape the arts center. They worked side by side, tearing down rotted beams and sketching new spaces. The mansion began to transform. Solar panels gleamed, the garden bloomed, and the library became a hub for local artists. Ezra's confidence grew, his talent no longer buried under debt or doubt. But every night, as they sat under the oak tree, he wondered, was this partnership enough to build a life together? One evening, Julian took Ezra to the rooftop, now a garden overlooking Savannah's skyline. The city sparkled below, and Julian's eyes shone with something deeper. "I didn't just buy this house," he said, taking Ezra's hand. "I found a home with you." Ezra's throat tightened. He'd spent years hiding, fearing love would cost him everything. But here, with Julian, he felt whole. Could he finally let go and love without fear? They faced challenges, budget overruns, community pushback, Ezra's lingering guilt over his father's disapproval. But Julian's belief in him never wavered. One night, as they painted the library walls, Ezra found a letter tucked inside his father's old desk. It was addressed to him, written before his dad's death. "Ezra, I was wrong to judge you. Love who you love. Build your life." Tears fell as Ezra read it, Julian's arm around him. The letter was a release, a permission to live fully. The arts center opened to a packed crowd, the mansion alive with music and laughter. Ezra and Julian stood together, their hands clasped, as the community celebrated. Claire's shadow was gone, the bank's threats a memory. Ezra realized the house wasn't his home anymore, Julian was. Their love, built on trust and shared dreams, was the true foundation. As the night ended, they returned to the oak tree, its branches swaying in the breeze. Julian carved their initials into the bench, next to the words, "Love builds a home." Ezra smiled, his heart full. "We did it," he whispered. Julian kissed him, soft and sure. "We're just getting started." The mansion stood behind them, no longer a burden but a testament to what they'd built together. Ezra had lost his father's house, but he'd gained something greater, a love that held him, a future he could design. What does it mean to find home? For Ezra, it was Julian's hand in his, and the promise of a life where they could both be whole.